Hello, this is Nathan Mertz. This is my final project for Curriculum and Instruction 7304, the Social Justice and Multicultural Education section. My final project is titled The Promise and Hope of Education. I will be discussing current problems in today's education and how they affect the promise and what the hope of education's future is. There are many issues that education faces today, such as over-testing and political policies that affect education that are not effective. But since this is a social section of this course, we will look at social issues that hinder learning in the classroom. And these issues are race, class, and linguistic and cultural diversity. So let's begin with race. A student's race can lend itself to preconceptions by students and preconceptions by teachers. And these preconceptions are not accurate. Student ability, intelligence, and success are sometimes judged on these preconceptions of that student's race. So teachers and educators have to find ways to not garner these preconceptions about students that are different races than themselves. And not give special treatment to students that are of one race and treat other students of a different race differently. Also in education, race is used usually to show differences between one group and another, such as achievement gaps and discipline issues. And it's usually used to show differences between African American students and Caucasian American students. And here's a great quote by Singham that says, "Statistics for whites are usually taken as a measure of the natural state of society, and black statistics are usually a measure of the problem." And I think that quote really rings true. So how can teachers overcome the issue of race? I think the best way to do that is to incorporate race into schools, classrooms, and learning, develop and embrace racially diverse classrooms. Education, here's a quote by Patterson, "Education reform must include claiming a school's racial identity and an acknowledgement that the world is a place where race matters." Race shouldn't be overlooked, and you shouldn't teach educators in schools shouldn't be colorblind to race, because race does have a big effect on students and their learning and who they are. But students cannot be judged or prejudged based on their race. Another issue is class. The social class that a student is identified with, whether that's what that student actually belongs to or whether it's what they're perceived to be a part of, can determine that student's success in school. And there's a deep belief in America that we are all born equal and that we all have the same opportunities. And that really just isn't true in the real world. American students are more likely to succeed if they are born into an upper class and not born into a low class or born into poverty. Students that are born in the upper class and upper middle class have far more opportunities than students who are born into poverty. So how can educators overcome this issue? I think the easiest way is that educators must become class sensitive. And that's kind of one of the I guess that's a promise, or should be one of the promises of education, is that educators should be class sensitive. And basically what that means is that all students should be on an even plane, no matter what part of town they live in, what car they drive, how much money their parents make. All students should be treated equal and have an equal opportunity to learn within a teacher's classroom. So the solution is that a teacher must adopt this policy within the classroom and not give special treatment to any student because they're of a different class. Another issue is linguistic and cultural diversity, and they play together, and they can have a huge impact on student learning and success. Obviously, culture affects the way you view the world, and if you're from a different culture, you may view the world differently. The linguistic side of this is that many students speak a different language than they're asked to speak and write in on tests and in classrooms. One of these issues is code switching, and that sometimes students don't have the skills needed to switch between the language they speak at home and the language they're asked to speak in at school. And I think one of the problems is that education has with this issue and with all the issues that we've discussed is that teacher education and professional development programs fail to equip teachers properly to face these issues and to combat these issues effectively in their classroom. And specifically talking about linguistic and code switching, many teachers lack the linguistic training for linguistically diverse classrooms. And that was a quote by Wheeler. And I think that's very true. So the solution is that teachers should embrace linguistic diversity and code switching and cultural diversities in their classroom. And that these diversities are not deficiencies in students, they're actually attributes. And with the right guidance, students can develop skills that far excel students that are from one culture or do not or are more easily accepted into a classroom. So here's another great quote by Wheeler that's specifically talking about code switching, and it requires that students think about their own language in both formal and informal forms. And by doing this, it builds cognitive flexibility, which is a skill that plays a significant role in successful literacy learning. So when students have the ability to speak two languages, formally and informally, they're more likely to learn and to be successful. So teachers need to embrace cultural and linguistic diversities. So can teachers solve these issues that we've been discussing, these social issues of race and class and cultural and linguistic diversity? For me, I feel yes and no. Teachers can use strategies and adopt personal beliefs that combat these social issues within their individual classrooms and individual schools, which are great, but in the big picture, teachers cannot change education, its promise, or its hope on their own. And there's a great quote by Jones and Bagel that basically says, because of the social system that we have in this country and economic systems, the neoliberal capitalist system that we have, there's always going to be this divide between students that are rich and that are poor and that are in poverty. And there's always going to be these big inequalities with students. And that's something that teachers cannot fix, but they can create classrooms that level the playing field. And I think that's one of the promises and the hope and for education and what the future of education should be, is that teachers should embrace heterogeneous classrooms that have lots of diversity, and not see these diversities as deficiencies or as hurdles, but see them as opportunities to excel learning. Also, and personally, as a social studies teacher, I feel that the promise of public education is to ingrain democracy into students, and that schools should be conditioning students to be effective citizens. There's a good quote there by Morrison that basically says, if we ever hope to have schools that are engaging and that truly embody democracy, then the classes within them must provide opportunities for students to experience autonomy, freedom, and choice in what is studied, when, and how. And I think that's very well put, is that schools should be churning out citizens that are ingrained in democracy and are supportive of our democratic republic form of government that we have. And this next slide is my reference page. There's lots of great references there that I used. I would like to say, looking at the overall layout of my Prezi, is that it was done on purpose. I intentionally laid the slides in kind of a hodgepodge order to kind of reflect that the promise and hope of education at the moment is kind of in disarray. But it can be fixed, and I think that's another hope of education, is that education can get better, and it will get better. I thank you for listening to me, and have a good night.